What's going on, everybody? Brady Feaster here. I am with Stephen Carter, and I'll tell you just from the start there, it feels weird calling him Stephen Carter because in 10th grade he was my English teacher. He, like many of us in the entrepreneurship space, has continued to remake himself and now does a lot of really neat things at Cincinnati Hills Christian Academy, teaching the entrepreneurial mindset and building into the next generation of business owners. Stephen, Mr. Carter, whatever you want me to call you, thanks for coming on today.
Listen, Brady, after this, you're going to be writing an in-class essay for me. So I hope you remember the 5-paragraph format because we are going to drill that home, man. It's good to be on and appreciate it. I go by Mr. Carter, Stephen Carter, whatever the students decide to call me, and it's not always positive. So we answered everything.
That's good, man. It's interesting to just the diversity of conversations that you can have with people throughout the years of going through Charles Dickens and Julius Caesar to now we're talking about trends of the 21st century entrepreneurial space. So I'd love to hear, and I remember my time in high school, I could tell even at 16 there were some rumblings that the way that you were just teaching, the energy of what you were trying to impart on us was a little bit deeper than just content from a book. So tell me how you've gone from an English teacher to teaching entrepreneurship.
Believe it or not, the jump was not as extreme as it sounds. When you talk about an English teacher, if you're like me, your immediate perception is of an old guy in a tweed jacket with a pipe, and he's talking about A Tale of Two Cities and Sidney Carton and how, you need to read this book. And in many ways, that is a very traditional model of English. And I'll have to say, I did my fair share of convincing students to read books they didn't want to read. We don't have to have a moment of truth, Brady, but if you're like most of my students, you didn't actually read every book that I handed you, but you at least pretended in a really good way, right? The jump was really interesting because I discovered in my journey as an English teacher, I taught English for 10 years, and the idea was it's a sales job. Like everything's a sales job. If you're a teacher, you are trying to sell someone that the content you're teaching has value to their life. Now, you want to talk about something hard to sell. It's English, okay? That is a tough sell. Silas Marner to 16-year-old kids, tough sell. The point was, I was discovering along the way that there were certain universal mindset truths about human nature that would be beneficial and helpful. And the more that we focused on that, the subject was more or less just a stepping stone to timeless truths about success. So making the leap from, hey, we're going to talk about Silas Marner to, hey, we're going to talk about compound interest. Well, ultimately, we're talking about habit formation, and habit formation is key to setting goals, and setting goals is key to establishing success and rhythms and vision for your life. So I look at the journey of entrepreneurship as something that infiltrates every subject, every grade, every level. And when I talk about entrepreneurship, I'm talking about a mindset, and we'll talk more about this, but growth mindset, grit, redefining failure, opportunity seeking. You can develop grit in an English classroom. You can develop a growth mindset in an English classroom or a math classroom or on a football field, right? The setting will change. The content remains the same.
Well, I love that. And Stephen and I, we are partners in teaching this grit. I coach high school football at the same place where he teaches this entrepreneurial mindset. And I totally agree. My wife is an 8th grade math teacher, and we have so many conversations of whether you're reading a book, you're solving for an equation, or you're game planning to stop a triple option. There is some timeless, transcendent type of traits that these settings can teach you that if you're so honed in and focused on the content itself, that you'll miss the overall big picture of what you're setting people up to be able to achieve as time goes on. And to answer your initial question here, Stephen, I'm glad that you fell for the act. I didn't read as many of the books that you assigned to me as you maybe would have liked. I'm glad that I was able to be persuasive enough and get by and somehow end up with a diploma out of there. So
there you go. That's exactly
funny
right.
stuff there Funny stuff there for sure. Tell me a little bit about the spark.
Yeah.
What sparked the entrepreneurship program that you've been part of spearheading at CHCA, and how has that taken form over the past decade?
Multiple sparks. The first spark was just the interest in seeking opportunity. My philosophy around my career was I was not going to become the person who just did the same thing over and over. I told myself early on, Stephen, if you wake up one day and you find yourself teaching the same thing you've been teaching for 10 years in the same way with the same jokes and the same material, that's when you quit. That's when you leave and find a different job. And fortunately, I can say that never actually that never happened, right? I was always looking for ways to keep it alive. So while I was teaching English, I was coaching cross country. I was running the debate team program at the school. My wife and I were about to have our second baby. And it just so happened that our principal at the time said, oh, I should ask Stephen to run this coffee cart program that we're starting. And of course, choose one of the busiest people at the school to do it. And I jumped at the opportunity. Because why not? Like learning more about coffee, that sounds really cool. And working with students around that sounds like a lot of fun. The spark was seeing the engagement in real time. You spend 10 years in a classroom trying to engage students and being moderately successful. Then you discover something that engages kids without a lot of effort. I was not having to convince students, hey, you should care about this. You should care about these sales. You should care about tracking this revenue. You should care about this inventory. They were already caring about it. That was a spark that said to me, this is more real. This is an education that cuts to the heart of the why, to use Simon Sinek language, quicker than some of our other models. The second spark for me actually came from, if you know Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the author of that, Kiyosaki, he's got this YouTube video where he talks about fake teachers. He's like, he's like, I wouldn't take an accounting class from someone who is not an accountant. It's a fake teacher. And I was watching that and I thought, I'm starting this entrepreneurship program, but I'm not an entrepreneur. Now, that, by the way, was a mislabel. Of course, I was an entrepreneur. I was thinking like an entrepreneur. But in my mind, I didn't have an MBA. I hadn't gone to business school. Who was I to do this? I was a fake teacher. And I realized, Stephen, you've got to understand the heart of what it means to think like an entrepreneur so that you're not a fake teacher. You need to be a real teacher. That led to an incredible journey that I never would have anticipated had I stayed in the English classroom. That led to a journey where I began interviewing parents and saying, what do you want out of your kid's education? What's the what unique value proposition can we provide? What's the value that you want? Understanding the customer's desire. That led to personal finance. That led to compound interest. That led to writing my first book. That led to launching a business, which now led to a business where I start entrepreneurship programs in other schools. And here's what I will tell you. The spark turned into a series of sparks, turned into a flame that became a passion. And the passion is the educational system's broken. It's just broken. We can sit back and complain about that. Or we can see it as an opportunity to say, how can we engage students in today's society, teach them a mindset of success so they can go out and start a business, they can work for a business, they can do whatever they want and achieve success. So I am more on fire now because of those series of sparks than I've ever been before in my professional career.
I love that. There's a couple pieces I want to circle back on and drill into a little bit. One piece that you mentioned is the engagement that happened naturally when you started taking kids, my sister included. She was one of the initial the initial pioneers of that coffee cart way back in the day. People like her who came alive when you were talking about getting this student-run business off the ground. What is it about ventures like that tend to breed more engagement versus maybe traditional subject matter?
Our coffee cart at Cincinnati Hills Christian Academy officially launched in 2014. So we just celebrated the 10th year anniversary of it. And I had the chance to talk to a couple of the students that were part of that initial group. And I kind of went into that conversation hoping that they were going to say things talking points. I was hoping they were going to say, I really appreciate that we developed the grit, and I really appreciated that we developed, these mindset attributes. What I heard instead was a young lady I talked to who really helped launch it a couple years before your sister started. And she said, Stephen, she called me Mr. Carter as well, but she said, Stephen, every job I've had since, I've been a manager or higher. And I think it's because I got so much confidence from running that business in high school that I carried that confidence with me in every phase of my life since then. She's now 28 years old, been a manager ever since. And I realized it's not just having a business. It's not just giving kids a chance to, in this case, make espresso and sell it to people. Or now we have a wood-fired pizza oven business, a greenhouse business, a fine dining restaurant. It's not just the act of operating the business. What it is enabling a hands-on ownership approach. When you make the decisions, when you're involved in the process, when you see the value and the implications, you connect the dots. I'll give you one quick illustration here. Compound interest. I've taught a lot of things over the years. The single most exciting lesson I teach is compound interest. It's not exciting because I teach it. It's exciting because of the content. Because you're going to take a room full of kids who've all heard that phrase before. Every single one of them's heard it before. None of them understands it. They think they do. But when you show them how their money works harder than they do and how it grows over time, and you pull up that hockey stick graph and show them exponential growth, light bulbs go off. And they say, they're 16 years old, and they say, why has no one told me about this yet? It's like, dude, you're 16. You've got plenty of time. Get started. And it creates a sense of urgency that what they're learning has immediate real-world application. Look, I've been a product of education a long time, as have you, okay? I have not been called on to use the periodic table of elements one time since graduation. Not once. Maybe in the poster for Breaking Bad, when I'm like, oh, look what they did. That's clever. That's it. Okay? I use these mindset skills and principles of the entrepreneurial mindset every single day of my life. Students intuitively know value when they see it and when it has real world application.
I love that. They intuitively know value when they see it. I've experienced that. I was sitting down a couple months ago with a couple of kids on our football team who there's some cross-pollination happening between what we're building in the football program and what you're building in the entrepreneurship program. And we were talking about both these kids working retail part-time jobs like any other 17-year-old who, wants to be able to have spending money for gas and take their girlfriend out to a date on Saturday night. And both of them worked these retail jobs for 2 months. They saw their paycheck, the hourly rate, the taxes taken out of it, the lack of ownership they felt in this role. And then their minds got thinking, what could I do just in my neighborhood and my community around me that I could double, triple my earnings and then start having this compound interest mindset that Mr. Carter's teaching me. And so one of these students, he started a trash can power wash cleaning business. And I love it. So I called this kid up. I said, you know what? My trash can's pretty smelly, as trash cans get. I need you to power wash this sucker out. And they did an awesome job. They talked about, hey, here's what a subscription model could look like. Here's what promoting us could look like. They're 16 years old. And that all started from getting in that experience of, you know what? And they both told me that it was almost this vow. I never want to work for somebody else again. That's rare to be able to breed that at 16 years old. Giving just a little taste of that. It's once you've tasted that, there's ups and there's downs, and those downs can feel pretty crushing. But that freedom, it's hard to go back the other way once you get a taste of it.
Now, are we talking about Marcus Chinsang or Nate Dobines? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Their business is called Transform. Now, the core fundamental principle at the heart of entrepreneurship, I believe this through and through, whether you are in your industry, whether you are a franchise owner, whether you are starting something from scratch, if you're working for someone, same principle applies. You got two options. You can default to conformity. That default method is exactly what you just described. I'm working a retail job. I'm making $12 an hour. That's a default to conformity. It's easy. It's the path of least resistance. Or you can say, I'm going to transform. That name of the business, their trash can cleaning business, is Transform. They are literally transforming. It's garbage cans, right? You can't get much grosser than a garbage can. But they're transforming that can. And then, of course, figuratively, they are transforming themselves as they develop the grit as a byproduct of their work, as they develop the perseverance, as they work toward these goals. And you're absolutely right. I tell this all the time to students. It's a Jim Rohn concept, and it works great with the entrepreneurial mindset, which is you're making $12 an hour, and you say to yourself, well, that's all they pay me. Oh, so is that all they pay anybody? Well, no. I mean, some people get more than that. Okay, so it's all they pay you because of the value you're providing them. There's a direct relation between value and compensation. You want more compensation, you make yourself more valuable. See, we've created this mindset. Oh, if I want more compensation, I should demand more compensation. You make yourself more valuable, you're going to get more compensation. That's the key. That's the reward at the end of that journey, but it requires grit to get there.
Getting a taste of that is key, and I totally agree. Being able to break out of that almost victim mentality of being able to say, hey, if I provide more value, chances are I'm going to see my fortunes increase. I'm curious, Stephen. I work with a lot of people who were maybe in a similar phase of life where you were, where they're making vows to themselves, like you did, of if I ever find myself making the same jokes, teaching the same stuff, I'm bored. I feel like I'm not making an impact. I'm not maximizing my value to myself and my family. And luckily, the school that you've been a part of has given you so many off ramps to be able to really spread your wings, and now you've been able to parlay that into awesome other individual entities. For folks who are in that phase, who they don't have a natural off ramp, they've made that vow to themselves of if it ever gets like this, I'm done. And they just had that day that was the last straw. They're done. How would you advise someone to get out of that funk?
Oh, wow. This is a really interesting question because there's a few layers to it, but I'll start by saying this. Let's look at it from two different scenarios. Scenario one is I'm always a little hesitant to tell people to leave a scenario until it's time to leave the scenario. So what you've just painted, like the scenario's done. But in the event that it is salvageable, I do encourage people to at least explore that based on Cal Newport's concept of career capital. You know, I was talking to a guy recently who's been teaching for about 8 years, and he was thinking about leaving the teaching profession and going into like a sales job. I was like, listen, you can do that. You can do that. Absolutely, 100%. But imagine the value of having taught 8 years. Imagine the value that you're bringing. How can you capitalize on that value in a new way? The definition of impact that moves me the most is refusing to stay in the same place, but committing to the same path. Now, we can commit to the same path and leave our job and start a business, buy a franchise, do whatever. We can commit to the same path by doing that. What we have to do is avoid becoming complacent. Complacency is where growth dies. You know, Craig Groeschel has a great quote. Craig Groeschel says, growth and comfort cannot coexist. They don't coexist. You're getting too comfortable. Guess what, buddy? You stopped growing. You stopped growing. Guess what? As John Maxwell would say, you're dead and you don't know it yet. We all know it, okay? But you haven't been informed yet. The fact of the matter is this: if you are in a situation where you do not have the ability to grow, you got to get out of that situation. Because growth is the essence of life. And if we are in a situation where we have a runway for growth, it means we have a runway to live out the entrepreneurial mindset. So you mentioned my situation at my school. if at some point the school had said, Stephen, we don't really want you to pursue that. We want you to stay in English. We want you to stay here, stay where you are. That would have forced me into a fixed mindset. And I would have either had to accept complacency and become the person I didn't want to become, or I'd have had to leave. So when I evaluate my situation, if I'm forced into a fixed mindset, if I'm forced to become complacent, I have got to get out of there. I got to get out. I got to spread my wings. I got to figure out the path to make impact. And that leads to vision. I talk all the time about the need for mission, vision, values. And I don't believe those are just words on a wall. I believe those are words on the heart and the soul of the individual. And that if you are not driven by a vision, then you will be part of someone else's vision. Not that that's a bad thing. But if you're a visionary, you got to be casting that vision and then chasing it down.
I love that. We start all of our consultations when we're helping people who are exploring their next and seeing if franchising could be a solution to that next step. And similar to you, Stephen, we're Simon Sinek people. We start with the why, and it's maybe not as spelled out as the mission, vision, values, but we want to anchor to a compelling reason. Why are you doing this to begin with? What does a home run look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road for you professionally, personally, and for your family as a whole? So obviously the most effective companies, entities, from startup to scaling to becoming a household name, they have good clarity on their mission, their vision, their values. Individually, though, that is maybe not something that is as widespread, that individuals have a mission, vision, and values. What does that look like for you? How have you gone about establishing that set of vision, mission, values?
Yeah. Okay. So I use the model EOS. Do you do anything with EOS and the framework there? Okay.
Yes.
Big Gino Wickman fan. I would highly recommend anyone who listens to this, start with traction and then work through the EOS library as a business owner, but more importantly, as an individual. I believe wholeheartedly your family needs a mission and a vision and core values. You personally need a mission, a vision, and core values. And there's two reasons. One, it establishes direction. And two, it creates a filter. Now, direction, think compass. Okay, I'm going to hop in my car. Recently, my family and I drove to the Great Wolf Lodge up in Sandusky, Ohio. Hop in the car. If we had hopped in and I had said, all right, we're going to head out. We're going to try to find this place. We might have headed north. We might have we might have ended up in Lake Erie for all I know. I don't know. Okay. But probably not at our destination. The point is, obviously I wouldn't do that. I'm going to use Google Maps. What does Google Maps do? Google Maps provides the destination and the route for the journey. That's what a vision does for your life. We focus so much on where we're going day to day, but not where we're going year to year. Have a vision for what is going to be true in 5 years and 10 years. Then the filter comes from your mission and your values. That's your decision-making filter. Look, in the entrepreneurial world, in any world, you're going to have decisions to make every single day. If you have no filter on those decisions, you're making decisions based on urgency, importance, or feelings or emotions. And then you're going to end up moving around like a hamster in a wheel nonstop and saying, did I even accomplish anything? But if you've got a filter, does this decision pertain to my core values? Does this decision pertain to my mission? My mission, my personal mission, is the same mission of my business. My mission is to develop the entrepreneurial mindset in all learners so they are radically transformed to impact their lives. I have the same mission with my family. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean I sit around and preach about the entrepreneurial mindset, although I do a little bit too much. My kids get annoyed with me about that. But it means that we are constantly looking for opportunities to develop a mindset in our kids of resilience so they are transformed through the experiences we do as a family. It means when I talk to you, I'm going to talk about the entrepreneurial mindset and its transformative power. It means when I teach or when I work with schools, I operate from that filter. So if someone comes to me with an opportunity, I filter it through my mission, through my values, growth mindset, grit, redefining failure. Does it help me live out those values? So if we don't have that nailed down, we tend to be directionless and we tend to not have a filter. So I say, take a day, get with your spouse, get with a team, or go off on your own into the woods and work on mission, vision, values before anything else.
Having that starting point is so crucial. It's so crucial for any season of life, but especially when you're getting something off the ground. It's crucial. Like you said, you don't want to just hop on the highway and hope you get to the right place. That's fighting a losing battle. There's really no doubt about it. As we wrap up here, Stephen, tell me a little bit about, for you personally, all the irons that you have in the fire, what you have on the horizon for the rest of 2024 and beyond, and the best way for people here to follow along with all that you've got going on.
Well, I am teaching the entrepreneurial mindset, but I want to explain that's not just limited to schools. That's everybody. My main emphasis is to get into private K-12 schools around the United States and help transform the educational experience. I'm currently working with schools around the US and encouraging them to be part of this journey through my podcast, which is called Entrepreneurial Mindset with Stephen Carter. It's on Apple and Spotify and everywhere. My newsletter for schools. So I'm very plugged into schools. So the first thing I'd say to listeners is, hey, is your school interested? Let's talk. Let's get this going. I help schools start meaningful programs. But more importantly than that, I help individuals understand what it means to think like an entrepreneur. Doesn't mean you have to become an entrepreneur, although statistics tell us that more and more people are getting into entrepreneurship, especially at younger ages. So we have to equip people with the mindset to thrive in that. And I do that through my workshops and my books and my podcast. So stay connected. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can hop on my website, Seed Tree Group, which is my company. Listen in at the podcast, and let's keep the conversation going.
Love it. Well, Stephen, Mr. Carter, all of the above, man. Thanks so much for all that you're doing. I get a front row seat to the entrepreneurial mindset, the grit that the students that you're producing. As a result, we win some football games and my trash cans get cleaned, and there's a whole lot more benefit to society that comes out of all that you're doing. So appreciate you, man, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.